A jumper once contrasted cow springs with a piece of Japanese origami form. From the outset there doesn't have all the earmarks of being that much to it yet. As one tests further, it continues to unfurl to uncover increasingly more. There was a casualty here during Remembrance Day weekend 2000. 3. Chris Henson was found in the most difficult part of the cavern, called the upstream segment solo, with gas in the copies and a full-body bottle plan, on recording the mind-boggling upstream area experience jumper. Marion M. Cosco's set out on the investigation of cow unveils to January the 6th, 2023 comparably to Chris. He was jumping solo and tragically. Like Chris, this excursion would likewise end in misfortune. This is the Cool Springs fiasco of 2023. Marion Cosco's was brought into the world on December the 21st, 1963, in Glita, Poland. As the second of 6 kids, Marian grew up in its home since early on. He had a profound love for experience. He was an eager hiker, skier, climber, swimmer, and competitor. He partook in many situating occasions. He wanted to travel and visited a large portion of Europe as well as parts of Asia and Africa, while in school anyway. By the age of 17, he had found his deep-rooted enthusiasm scuba plunging. He joined the Kalmar Scuba Jumping Club in his old neighborhood. He plunged the whole way across Poland, joining different clubs and turning out to be nearest with Score Penna Plunging Club in Alin, Poland. There, he met his future spouse, Eva Dwara. They traversed Europe together, at last moving to the US in February 1991. Following their wedding, this is where they chose to begin their family, seek after their professions. Furthermore, fabricator coexistence. Mariam turned into actual training instructor, moving his understudies to Cherish Games for more than 20 years at Woodland Park School, Locale 91. Overall blemish, and passed on his adoration for investigation and experience to his youngsters, as educators. Moran and Eva were lucky to go on summer-long outings with their kids and cherished canine Coco. Every year the family set out for a cross-country, setting up camp excursion, visiting public stops, and getting to know each other. They go through their days, kaying, climbing, and swimming. Around evening time, they lounged around the open-air fire, excluding stars that extended in millions each colder time of year. They were joined on ski trips by companions who became family. The gathering leased a major house, skiing together into the new year. Every individual who realized Moran knew the amount he beyond a doubt cherished his significant other and kids. He had vast stories to recount. His 2 children and girl, and his most noteworthy pride was being their dad. His SM was never greater than when he was with his family. All through these years, scuba jumping stayed a major piece of his life. Moran spent pretty much every end of the week plunging. He made a plunge, all in caves, sea streams, wrecks under ice. And around evening time, he generally added to his assortment of gear and certificates. With honest energy, with each jump he became hopelessly enamored again. Moran had gone to Florida with a gathering during special times of year. With the motivation behind cave jumping, however, he stayed in North Florida to keep plunging solo when the rest of the gathering went back home. Marion was a confirmed and experienced cave jumper who was likewise guaranteed and experienced on the model of shut-circuit rebreather he was utilizing during the excursion sooner or later preceding this plunge. While still in the organization of the jump bunch, Marion's breather tumbled from a pickup truck rear end, harming the fissure connector, consequently forestalling the utilization of the unit Shearwater Petroleum PC-2. Screen P2P2. Fractional tension of oxygen mirrors how much oxygen gas broke down in the blood. Regardless of realizing's gear, was 40. Marion continued, in not entirely settled to investigate cow unveils, to his next plunge booked for January the 6th. Many consider Cow Spring to be among the most lovely of all North Focal Florida cave plunging locales. Albeit no signs imprint the way to Cool Spring, it is generally simple to find. Gave you follow headings 200 or 300 yards into the forest. the Cow Spring entry street closures, and you will track down stopping under the trees close to the north side of the sinkhole. The simplest and most secure method for entering the water is to tape the path around the sinks passed on side. This prompts a progression of regular stone edges and steps on the east side of the sinkhole. In years past, admittance to Cow Spring was accessible irregularly, as different land proprietors would now and again door or post the property. With the acquisition of the site by the Public Spical Society Cave Jumping segment anyway, access was guaranteed into the indefinite future. Most of the Cow Spring framework was studied during the mid-1980s by Wes Skiles, Woody Jasper Lamar, Hires and Tom Morris. For a long time the upstream side of Coal Spring was open just to jumpers utilizing side-mounted bottles, and provided that such jumpers knew where to find the extremely dark spring entry. That is until Lamar Hires was strolling to the water with a gathering of cavern plunging understudies. As he passed a neighborhood, untamed water jumpers on the path driving down to the water's edge, he heard them examine, having arrived at a profundity of 70 feet or 21 m, realizing that this was regularly incomprehensible. Utilizing back-mounted chambers, Lamar offered these two a free cavern jumping course, assuming they would show him where they had been. As it turned out, these two undeveloped jumpers had figured out how to find a second access to upstream Cow, one that had evaded experienced cave jumpers for quite a long time. The revelation of a back-mounted access to Cow Spring welcomed both happiness and dread. From one perspective, it implied that almost any cavern jumper could now see the exceptionally lovely upstream Cowway, a way generally whole by the attack of jumpers who visit the region's other famous destinations. Then again, this very openness currently put upstream Cow's delicate arrangements in danger. There have been a few reported occurrences of harm, which are explanations behind concern. Hence, many cavern jumpers who know how to do so are hesitant to separate precisely the way that one gets into upstream Cow. Either the old Sid mount or new back mount entrance are something jumpers are logical characterized on their own in this manner. The main way most cavern jumpers are prone to get into upstream Cow is to be told the best way to do as such by one more jumper who believes their capacity to not make harm. The upstream entry Coal Springs has a significant limitation, requiring moderate body and hardware control to go through a generally vertical to level progress at around 40 ft of profundity. The upstream leg of the cavern comprises to a great extent of one passage, despite the fact that there are a couple of branch-offs that by and large go just a brief distance or circle back to the fundamental line. Admittance to upstream off Cow ought to be restricted to those with extraordinary abilities and experience under their belts, as this is an incredibly delicate framework. Just those with 100 late post-full cavern confirmation jumps ought to try and start to consider plunging this site. This is a very delicate framework. Jumpers must guarantee their lightness control is amazing before entering this framework, as it contains dynamite dirt banks and fragile girthy arrangements all through that are effectively harmed, as well as trying high stream and extra limitations past the entry. The stream is, for the most part, lively. As a matter of fact, between rock stream drop and Not My Shortcoming, a region with few naturally sound handholds, there is a polypropylene pull along line to work with getting past a segment of cavern where is in many cases difficult to make progress by kicking alone. Profundities run in the 60 t or 18 m. Reach for the initial 300 fd or 90 m of infiltration. Here they drop to the 70 t or 21 m reach, until one arrives at Not My Shortcoming about 700 ft or 200 m from the entry upstream of Not My Issue. One experiences profundities in abundance of 100 fd or 30 m. Rigorously speaking, Cow Spring isn't a spring by any stretch of the imagination. However, a sinkhole with both spring and siphon destinations. Water streams toward Cow Spring from the Upper East in a similar general heading as it does to the adjoining Peacock Orange Woods and Toad frameworks. From a profundity of 70 ft or 21 m, this water gushes through the rocks at the foundation of the sink opening's garbage cone, then streams into both of the two siphon burrows. On its west side from here, the water goes one more 500 to 600 feet, or 150 to 180 m, to arise at two resurgences along the north bank of the Swanee stream, which together are referred to as running spring at this point. Nobody has effectively made the association among Cow and Running Springs. Marion showed up at Cow and Vales to January 6, 2023 for his planned plunge. He made a hazardous and ineffectual field fix to his rebreather following the harm to the unit's gap link. Unfit to fix the wrecked connector, Marion supposedly cut the link and afterward utilized an intensity recoil fold around the finish of the slice link, trying to waterproof the link end. Subsequent to finishing his gear checks, Moran continued towards the upstream entry of Cow Springs water, spilling under the psychologist wrap, and the link being presented to water caused misleading readings with his rebreather unit's oxygen sensors, which would have been shown on the heads up show. Acknowledging he was experiencing an issue, Marion endeavored to rescue, yet was simply ready to close the plunge surface valve most of the way before the switch became unscrewed, keeping him from completely shutting the circle. The model of CCR Marion was utilizing is of the consistent mass stream plan. Once the valve is open, oxygen will stream until either the valve is shut or the chamber drains dry. Marion started to move back in the direction of untamed water as he endeavored to convey the controller from one bailout chamber. As he turned the line, he was still, during the time spent laying, became tangled around the sent bailout controller and his body, keeping him from arriving at the conveyed second stage. He then endeavored to send the second stage from his second Senkank bailout tank, yet either inadvertently hooked onto the inflator hose A instead of the subsequent stage hose, or he was utilizing the inflator hose to pull this bailout chamber second state reachable. When he passed out, a bailout methodology ought to be a genuinely basic undertaking, one that is instructed and worked on during rebreather. Preparing for this situation, Moran had long hoses on both of his bailout controllers, which were gotten to the chambers, and as portrayed over one controller, became caught in the rule during organization, and the second was not quickly accessible since the chamber was no longer bunged against Marion's body. This is certainly not an exceptional design. However, the entrapment of his underlying bailout controller and the subsequent controller being far off turned into an unrealistic issue in the restricted accessible time in the event that he had at least one of his bailout controller got in the triangle framed by his mouth and shoulders. Bailout gas would have been promptly accessible. Additionally, the way that the jump surface valve handle fell off with the plunge surface valve neither completely opened nor shut implied returning on the circle was impossible. The next day, on January 7, 2023, Marion's van was noticed still stopped at the site with an O2 container and rule in the spring bowl that should have been visible from the deck. The Sani Region Sheriff's Office was advised of Marion's vanishing in the wake of calling the Swanee Province Sheriffs. The complainant called the Global Submerged Cave Salvage and Recuperation to prompt a jumper was thought lost and perished because of the length of elapsed time. She likewise informed the NSAS discs as proprietors of the site. Upon their appearance, two jumpers from the ICEA entered the water to influence a quest for Moran, yet returned after a couple of moments to prompt the casualty had been situated at the entry to the upstream cavern. As shown, Marion was plunging a CCR unit for which he was prepared, however, had just an upfront console to screen the breathing gas in the know, since the Fisher association with a petroleum PC was recently harmed. He had two 80 cubic feet aluminum chambers for bailout. The plunge supply valve of Marion's rebreather was in half-open, half-shut position, and the switch used to open-close the jumper supply valve had become unscrewed and was laying on the cavern floor, close to his body. Marion's rule, which had not yet been integrated with the gold line, was inexactly wrapped When around his body, trapped in the line, was a send-long-hose second stage. From one of his bailout chambers, Marion had a stranglehold on the inflator hose, coming from the principal phase of his other bailout chamber. The controller's second stage was not conveyed from this chamber. Yet, the chamber was not generally gotten in that frame of mind close by Marion's body. The inflators on his dry suit and lightness control gadget worked appropriately. Both AL-80 bailouts were full, similar to the casualty's dilutant chamber. The oxygen chamber on the CCR was unfilled. Marion's PC showed no development following 10 minutes following his underlying plunge. Following the evacuation of Marion's body with his stuff from the water assessment of the cut crevice link, showed the intensity recoil fold around the cut end effortlessly sneaked off, and water had entered under the wrap and was in touch with a cut link, and his body was thusly shipped to the clinical analyst's office for dissection, which recorded the reason of death as unplanned suffocating. Following the post-mortem examination and arrival of the ME's report, the dissection report was given to one more pathologist with no additional data concerning the above episode. This survey point-by-point signs that Moran might have experienced drenching aspiratory edema, if valid. This could make sense of the explanation he endeavored to rescue at long last. However, solo jumping is entirely expected in the cavern plunging local area because of the overt repetitiveness of breathing gas and stuff. Had he been plunging with a mate, this mishap would probably have finished as an episode or close. As opposed to a casualty, Marion had recently started his jump and was still in shallow water, and inside a brief swim to the section point. A PAL would have likely had the option to help Marion in getting one of his bailout controllers or offer air with him to clear out or basically get him to the help promptly to better the opportunity for his endurance. It tends to be construed the O2 chamber on the CCR drained dry. During the 24 or more hours, Marion was down preceding recuperation. Woods Park Grade School region kept on keeping the memory of Marion alive as the personnel and region families assembled to Walker K. for Mr. K roughly 5 months after his passing on June 6, 2023. He is recognized as a caring spouse, a gay father, a treasured sibling. May he find happiness in the hereafter. This has been Grasping Frightfulness. I desire to see you in the following one.